Why hello there and welcome back to Let's Make Us a Character. And in this episode we continue our exploration of the gamtacular world that is Gamma World, with Gamma World 2nd Edition from 1983, smack dab in the middle of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st Edition's lifespan. Another box set containing a double-sided 22 by 34 inch map, 64-page rulebook, 32-page adventure book, and dice. And this edition even includes a character sheet in the book, a thing that Dungeons & Dragons very much did not at the time. Yeah, you could buy them for Dungeons & Dragons, but I believe an included photocopyable character sheet was not a standard thing until like 3rd edition. And that box set was followed by 2 adventure modules, a GM screen, and a pack of pre-printed character sheets, which honestly are moderately worse than the one in the book. I realized I just kind of offhandedly mentioned that there were only 4 1st edition Gamma World releases in the previous video, and since there are so few releases for each edition, figured I might as well just keep offhandedly mentioning them. So with a growing amount of Gamma content to get through, let's make us a Gamma World 2nd edition character. We have the now standard 6 Gamma World attributes: mental strength, intelligence, dexterity, charisma, constitution, and physical strength. And we roll 4d6 for each and discard the lowest result. Unless you are a pure strain human, in which case you keep all 4 dice up to a maximum of 18 in constitution and 21 in intelligence and charisma. And speaking of pure strain humans, we once again have 3 character type options. Pure strain human, who once again it does seem like they are trying to make a legitimate attempt to have actual advantages to playing beyond just being human is default. They have above average constitution, intelligence, and charisma. They are immune to future mutations. Yeah, in previous editions you could be a mutated pure strain human. It was a weird thing. And then of course, as in the previous editions, they are also still given preferential treatment by robots and security systems, and a bunch of other stuff. Like, I actually kind of want to make a pure strain human for this video, but doing so would mean ignoring a large chunk of the material, so I will not. But I will continue pointing out all of the other advantages they get throughout the video. Then we have humanoids and mutated animals, which are basically the same, except that mutated animals can never pass for pure strain human, whereas humanoids without any disfiguring mutations can. And of course, a large amount of a mutated animal's base abilities, down to things like whether or not they can talk or have functioning hands, are going to be determined by the GM without any kind of insight on how that is supposed to be done. So I guess, once again, let's just keep things simple and make another humanoid. But before we get into all that wacky mutant nonsense, let's go over the attributes. Mental strength is used in determining the outcome of mental combat by referencing attacker and defender's mental strength on our old friend, the mental attack matrix. So with a mental strength of 8, if we were mental attacking a creature with a mental strength of 10, we would need to roll a 12 or higher to succeed. And determines the range, duration, and other characteristics of some mental mutations. Intelligence guides the GM's evaluation of what a character is likely to do in certain situations, determines the modification, if any, to the die roll when the character tries to figure out an artifact, which is +1 for every point of intelligence above 15 and -1 for each point under 6, so no adjustment for us, or like 86% of characters in general, and a secret third thing that I will discuss later. Dexterity determines who has the first choice of combat actions, modifies the die roll to hit a target in physical combat, once again by +1 for each point above 15 and -1 for each point below 6, as I said, 86%, and modifies the chance of characters being surprised, but I'm not sure exactly how on that one. Charisma modifies the reaction of NPCs to the character, determines the number of NPCs that will become followers of the character, and modifies the morale of followers and hirelings. So let's look up our charisma of 11 on the charisma table, and we have 4 maximum followers and no adjustment to morale or reaction. And then we look up the Charisma table modifiers chart, and as a humanoid, we have a modifier of 1 when dealing with pure strain humans and mutated animals, which is subtracted from our Charisma score to get an effective Charisma score of 10 for determining morale and reaction modifiers for NPCs of those types, which is still 0. Constitution is the number of dice used to get the character's hit points, so with a Constitution of 12, we get 12d6 hit points, so 47. And notable here, pure strain humans roll d8s instead of d6s. Determines the effects of radiation, poison, and biogenic weapons on the characters, which of course means more matrices, where we reference our constitution versus the intensity of the poison or radiation. And with a constitution of 12, we are immune to poisons of intensity 7 or lower, take 1 to 6d6 damage from poisons of intensity 8 to 13, and die from anything stronger, as well as taking 1 to 8d6 damage from intensity 3 through 10 radiation, gain a new mutation from intensity 11 through 14, and once again die from anything stronger. And as pure strain humans are immune to mutations, as mentioned earlier, they just continue taking that 8d6 damage through the mutation results. And just a little side note in case you decide to check out this game for yourself, this is referred to as a poison or radiation check, which the book makes sound like it is an active thing that you do, but it is just referencing constitution versus intensity on a matrix. Helps determine whether or not the character is knocked unconscious by an attack, and a secret fourth thing that I will discuss later. And physical strength determines how much weight the character can lift and carry while moving, which is 5 times physical strength in kilograms, and that is notably a maximum. To be considered unburdened, characters must be carrying no more weight than their physical strength in kilograms, then burdened when carrying up to 2 times their physical strength, and heavily burdened at anything above that, up to the aforementioned 5 times physical strength maximum. Modifies the amount of damage done in physical combat by +1 for each point above 15 and -1 for each point below 6, which is a little disappointing when this is our highest attribute and we still didn't get a bonus to anything. But I guess it does still help in determining whether characters successfully perform actions requiring physical power. And now that we've covered all of the basic stuff, let's get mutated. As usual, we roll 1d4 for our physical and mental mutations, so 4 and 2. Then we pull up the PC mutation table, which has undergone some notable changes. First, physical and mental mutations are now on the same table, with different roll values for human and animal mutants, so there is just one mutations table for everything. Except plant mutations, but those aren't really relevant right now. And the other big thing, you may notice that the mutations are no longer in alphabetical order, and that all of the defects have been moved to the beginning of the lists. And this is where those secret things I mentioned come into play. Now, when we roll for our mutations, we add our constitution or intelligence scores respectively to the rolls for physical and mental mutations. So, with intelligence of 11 and constitution of 12, we cannot roll the first 8 mutations on each list, which fortunately does include the 2 damage multiplying mutations, which are very much not fun. So your attributes do actually affect what mutations you get now, at least so far as it makes you less likely to roll defects. So let's roll, and 29 plus 12 is 41, horns or antlers, which gives us a set of 1 to 2 meter horns or antlers, which deal 2d6 damage to man-sized and 2d8 damage to larger targets. And a big item of note here, they have really stepped up their game in the formatting of the mutations. So, horns and antlers has a range of body because it only affects our body, a type of unconscious because it requires no conscious effort to use, and physical because it is a physical mutation. Duration and use of constant because it is always in effect, we continuously have the antlers, a number of self, which really should have been target, and damage of 2d6 or 2d8 against larger targets. And just for comparison, Mental Blast has a range of 15 meters, is a conscious mental mutation because it does require conscious effort to activate and is a mental mutation, a duration of constant, which does mean either continuous or instantaneous, is usable once every 30 seconds, which is every 3 rounds, has a number of targets of 1, and deals 3d6 damage. So overall, a really big improvement in the formatting, which is really nice because it makes it much easier to get all of that information at a glance, and saves them the trouble of having to write out all that information in the description, which they don't always do a great job of. Then 88, Heightened Balance, which adds 1 to our multiple for all dexterity checks, a sentence which has hopefully piqued your interest for later. And 28, Skin Structure Change, which changes the structure of our skin in some detrimental way. And the Gamma World classic, Water-Soluble Skin, which causes us to take 1d6 damage per minute that 25% or more of our body is submerged in water, and 2d6 damage per hour of rain exposure. And 58, Oversized Body Parts, which grants a beneficial increase in size to 1 body part, and Appendix Increased in Size, which grants immunity to poisons of 3d6 or less. So take that, Intensity 12 and lower poisons. Now for our mental mutations, and since there are less mental defects, we should be pretty safe here since we would literally have to roll a 4 or lower to get a defect. And fine, Periodic Amnesia, which gives us a 10% chance of permanently losing all memory of the past 14 days anytime we are reduced to below half total hit points, which actually does sound like a fun thing to roleplay. And 107, which, unless there is a secret mutation list that I am unaware of, presumably gets rounded down to 100, which is pick 2 good mutations. And let's take Regeneration, which allows us to heal 1 hit point of damage per 5 kilograms of weight once every 12 hours. And that is calculated based on 7 kilograms of weight per point of physical strength. So we can heal 21 points of damage every 12 hours, which in a game where you normally heal 1 point of damage per day of rest, could be a little useful, especially if it's the rainy season. And Teleportation, which lets us teleport up to 30 kilometers away once per hour, which once again could be very useful in situations where we find ourselves in water. And based on the previous videos, you might be thinking, oh, well, this character's done, there's no more than that, right? But as I said, the game has been stepped up. So now we need to determine our character's background. So let's just say that they are a member of Clan Squatcher, a confederation of small tribal communities across the Pacific Northwest, which would have a tech level of 1. And basically, tech level 1 covers things any tribal society would reasonably have. Tech level 2, more around what you'd find in a medieval society, and then tech level 3 is anything industrial and beyond. Kinda. An interesting thing about the tech levels is they're very much usage levels, not creation levels. So technological versions of things like swords and shields are tech level 2, since a tech level 2 character will fully understand how to use those things, as well as simple, more advanced things like certain grenades and firearms. Characters start with 4d4 times 10, so 70 gold, and we can buy any equipment of a tech level equal to that of our home base, with a 15% chance of being able to get equipment 1 tech level higher for double the price, or a 5% chance of 2 levels higher for triple the price. So let's say we wanted to buy a hammer, which is tech level 2. We would need to roll 15 or lower and pay 10 gold instead of 5. And no. So let's just get some leather armor and a shield. This seems like a character who is moderately concerned with protection, a spear for stabbing, and of course, adventuring essentials, leaving us with 10 gold to spare. And all of that equipment is within a number of kilograms equal to our physical strength, so we are currently unburdened. Our leather armor gives us an armor class of 6. This is descending armor class, so lower is better. And our shield, I will explain later. And our spear has a weapon class of 1. Unlike armor classes, a low weapon class is generally not good, and does 1d6 damage against man-sized targets. And finally, rank, which might seem like a level, but is different in important and fundamental ways. Characters start at rank 0 and obtain rank 1 after passing their Rite of Passage, which makes sense when you're running the introductory Rite of Passage adventure, but less so as a universal rule. So let's just say this character has passed her Rite of Passage and is rank 1. And then after rank 1, our rank increases once we've obtained enough status points. Yes, status points, not experience points, although you still get them for killing things. And as the change to status points may lead you to assume, the effects of status and rank are mainly social. So rank is added to charisma, just straight up added to charisma, which increases our max followers to 5. You add 2% per rank to checks made to obtain equipment above a base's tech level, so at rank 1, our chance of getting a tech level 2 at a tech level 1 base increases to 17%. We can also borrow an amount of equipment equal to our rank times 100 gold from bases associated with our community, as well as getting up to 1 night per rank free lodging at any associated bases. We subtract 2 times our rank from research rolls, which are a percentile roll under, which is why it's a negative bonus, and at rank 3 or higher, a character can attempt to join a cryptic alliance. Which, just since I brought it up, for example, the Brotherhood of Thought is a tech level 3 organization with a 100% chance of being accepted as a member as a pure strain human, humanoid, or android, a 95% chance as a mutated animal, and 50% chance as a mutated plant, which are still a thing but also still specifically stated to not be appropriate as player characters. And then if we were a member of the Brotherhood of Thought, we would earn status points when negotiating successfully with NPCs, equal to the amount of status points we would have gotten for defeating them in combat, as well as a number of points for recruiting new members equal to the new member's rank times 100. And since that would then replace our starting community, we would get access to borrowing equipment and free shelter at any Brotherhood of Thought bases. And if you're thinking, hey, this is starting to sound a little bit like Fallout, yeah, Fallout is heavily inspired by Gamma World. And for a game that seems so heavily combat and exploration focused, it is weird just how much character advancement is almost entirely social. Like, yeah, those social bonuses are going to help you get better equipment and more followers, but the way there is so much focus on a character's place and status in their community is a thing that I haven't really seen that much. And this character is done. So you may have already guessed, based on some of the things I mentioned, that Gamma World 2nd Edition actually has an attribute check system, although it's not as simple as the impromptu roll under d20 that I used in the previous videos. So now, when you need to test one of your attributes, you roll percentiles against said attribute, or more often, a multiple of that attribute. So for example, a check to jump across a 4-meter gap might be made against dexterity times 5, so 45. However, our heightened balance mutation increases the multiple of dexterity checks by 1, knocking it up to times 6, or 54. Then we roll the percentiles with success on a result equal to or under that value. Which is a little cumbersome, but not like objectively bad, and shows that TSR was actually trying new and novel things in the 80s, just, not with D&D. And now I suppose you are expecting a combat example, because that's just how I do these videos now, but before that, I do actually want to talk about the NPCs, because 2nd edition actually provides full stats for them, versus 1st edition and Metamorphosis Alpha, which provided an almost bare minimum, which required you to blindly fill in blanks for essential stats like mental strength. And similar to what Chaosium does, basically what's provided is species stats that can be rolled for individual NPCs. However, this is also a series that likes to put a lot of focus on creating your own creatures. Like, that's why all 3 editions up to this point have included entire sets of plant mutations which are not available to player characters. And I'll just let you wonder why I felt the need to specify up to this point. So why don't we look at the rules for creating NPCs, which have been covered in the previous editions, just like not as well. So step 1, choose what pre-apocalyptic non-mutant thing our post-apocalyptic mutant thing will be, and let's say a worm. Step 2, choose the base stats for the creature, and since we're dealing with a worm, I guess 1d4 minus 3 across the board. Step 3, if a mutant animal, which a worm is, roll 1d4 twice, with the creature having human-level intelligence on an even result, so 2, 4, or 6 are all even, so human-level intelligence, which starts at a base of 3d6. And yeah, absolutely no idea why it's roll 1d4 twice. Step 4, roll 3d4 twice to determine the number of physical and mental mutations, so 9 and 7, which seems like a lot, but are fairly average 3d4 rolls. Then we roll for all of those mutations, notably not adding any intelligence or constitution to the rolls, meaning that on this roll it is possible to roll those mutations that are below 4, which normally would be impossible for a starting player character. Step 5. Modify the dice rolls from Step 2 to account for the mutations, which kinda makes Step 2 feel a little unnecessary. Also choose an armor class, speed, natural attacks, and morale. And also I'm just going to go ahead and do hit dice here because it specifically tells you not to determine hit dice in Step 2, but never to determine hit dice. And if you are wondering why there are 3 speed listings, those are movement in kilometers per 4-hour march turn, meters per 10-minute search turn, and meters per 10-second action turn. A whole thing that I don't really want to explain, so I'm not going to. Step 6, determine how many of the creatures are likely to be encountered together, and notably they give the guideline that a group of 4 beginning PCs with tech level 1 equipment should be able to defeat the average group. Which does kind of make me question how they expect 4 starting characters with tech level 1 equipment to defeat 1 to 10 gamma moths, which emit intensity 18 radiation in a 6-meter radius. So let's just say that an average group of these worms are 1d4. And step 7, name the NPC species and make out a written description of it. So let's call this an Analithid, aka Squirming Horror. And secret step 7.5, I did rework some of the mutations into unique base abilities and just cut a few of them in an attempt to keep something of a coherent concept. Then a little artistic interpretation, and this monster is done. And now that we have a monster, let's introduce it to our character, which is a potentially surprising situation, so we'd better roll a d6, and since the result is greater than 2, we are not surprised. I mean, this is Gamma Terra, shit like this happens all the time. And combat can commence. Both parties roll a d6 for initiative, adding dexterity modifier, which neither of these characters has. And notably, this is group initiative. What we have here is 2 groups of 1, so in this case it is also single initiative, but if there were groups, it would be group initiative. And our squirmy friend goes first and unleashes the power of its Radiation Eyes, which allows it to blast a target with intensity 3d6 radiation, and it doesn't specify if the 3d6 is rolled at the time of obtaining the mutation or when the power is used, but that one sounds like more fun. So we get out our old friend, the Radiation Matrix, and look up our constitution of 12 versus radiation intensity of 9, and 7d6, so 25 damage. And now it is our turn to retaliate, Unfortunately, the Analythid's Beguiling mutation requires that we pass a 3 times intelligence check or be forced to use our least powerful weapon. So 3 times 11 is 33, and no, the worm is simply too splendid, so we must attack with our spear, requiring the physical attack matrix 1. So we look up the defender's armor class of 9 versus our spear's weapon class of 1 for a 2-hit number of 10, which is the number we need to roll equal to or over to hit the target, which we do, dealing 1d6 stab damage. However, a spear also deals double damage to targets that are larger than man-sized, so 12 damage. And now that all parties have acted, the round ends and the next begins. So once again, initiative is rolled, and the worm once again goes first. And not appreciating our little love stab and unable to use radiation eyes for another minute, it decides to just try and whack us with several hundred pounds of spiky worm meat. Which means we need the physical attack matrix 2, which is for natural attacks. So once again, we look up the defender armor class, but this time the defender is us, with an AC of 6. And since natural attacks don't have a weapon class, hit dice is used instead, in this case 12, for a 2-hit number of 9. And 10 minus 1 for our shield, because TSR never figured out ascending armor class. Hits for 3d8 plus 2d6 from the spikes, and remember, you add plus 1 damage for each point of physical strength above 15, so the worm's physical strength of 50 means that it's very good that that modifier maxes out at 6 for 21 total damage. But now it is our turn again, and things are not looking great, so we teleport back to our base camp 23 kilometers away. And now that we are out of combat rounds, use our regeneration mutation to hopefully help us not die. However, there is still one other item to address here, and that is artifacts, the other important part of Gamma World. It is a game of mutants and mysterious artifacts. So let's say that we have found such an artifact and want to identify it. If you watched the first edition video, you might be expecting me to pull out a chart that looks significantly more complicated than it actually is, while still being significantly more complicated than it actually needs to be, but no. For this edition, the flowchart item identification system has been removed in favor of something else. So let's say that this mystery item is of complexity level D. So we pull up the item complexity table and see that a level D artifact has a starting number of 10. The player then rolls a die determined by their character type, D12 for pure strain humans, D10 for humanoid, and D8 for mutated animals, modified by intelligence if above 15 or below 6, with that value then being subtracted from the start number. But then a die is also rolled for the artifact as indicated on the table, in this case a D8, which is added to the start number, and both of those adjustments combined give us a new start number for the next attempt. So in this attempt, the start number has overall decreased by 3, giving us a new start number for the next attempt of 7, and this change value is going to be annoyingly relevant. Then we just keep making attempts, rolling until such time as the start number is reduced to 0 or lower, at which point we have identified the thing, in this case, a laser pistol. However, remember that change value that I cryptically said was going to be annoyingly relevant. If we look in the final column of the artifact complexity table, we have a damage value, or rather 2, in this case +2 and +3. And basically, if the start number changes by that first value on any attempt, the artifact is broken. And if it's changed by the second value or higher, you damage yourself with the item, which does also identify the item, but shooting yourself with a laser pistol that deals 5d6 damage is generally never a good thing. So basically, if the artifact die ever exceeds the character die by that indicated value, the item is broken or damages you, which is very easy to do. Like, I roll these things for the video, and this was my 6th try. I broke the item twice and had it go off 3 times before I was able to identify it without incident. So the experience here is less meaningless than in first edition, but also significantly more risky. And worth noting here is that none of that math is player facing. So from the player's perspective, they just roll a die and wait to hear the result. And for identifying the artifact, we get nothing. However, we would get 1,000 status points if we turn it over to our community. Yes, now you only get status points for relinquishing items, not finding and identifying them. So whenever you find something, you need to choose if you want to keep and use it or turn it over for status points. And it is very much only items that are useful to player characters that are worth anything. So turning in a box of matches will earn you 100 status points, but turning in a functional microwave oven, 1d6. And that is another thing, you only get status points for turning over identified and functional items, including having functional power cells or ammunition if applicable. So you can't just use something until it runs out of power or ammo and then turn it in. But let's say that we did decide to turn over this fully functioning, fully powered laser pistol, and that the resulting 1,000 status points just happened to push us over 3,000. Which would increase our rank to 2, removing those 3,000 status points from our total. Personally, I kinda like non-cumulative experience points, but I understand why other people don't. And that basically just adds 1 to our charisma, which now gives us a +1 reaction adjustment against our fellow humanoids, but not other character types. Also, our bonus to research and item availability increases to 4, and we can now borrow up to 200 gold worth of equipment from our community bases. And that's it for Gamma World 2nd Edition. Like 1st Edition, it is an overall positive revision of the game that came before it. And that is a really interesting thing about this series. Because the editions came out so quickly, you really get to see this incremental refinement of the concepts and mechanics, and also just seeing TSR getting better at making books. Like, I already praised the formatting of the mutations and NPCs, but overall there's just a huge leap in the quality of layout over 1st edition. Of course, with these long-running series with lots and lots of additions, sometimes the changes are less subtle tweaks to the previous proven experience and more a hard left turn into something weird and unexpected. But that's for next time. And thank you for watching. If you enjoy my content, you can follow me on the social media. There are links in the description. And extra special thanks to my Fightin' Flail Snails, Broken Unicorn, Omar Parker, Randy Mulholland, and Toshiro Okuro. If you'd like to be cool like them, check out my Patreon. But if you don't want to do that, that's cool too. You can still hit all the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, or these other lovely videos that the dark, unseen hand of the YouTube algorithm has lovingly selected for you. And I will see you next time.